When my sister-in-law gagged at my food, she said, "How do you people eat this disgusting foreign garbage?" She was holding her nose and making retching sounds at my dining table, while my husband's entire family watched, and my mother, who'd spent 3 days cooking traditional dishes for this welcome dinner, stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. "I'm sorry, but what even is that?" "It looks like something died on the plate." Melissa pointed at the lamb biryani my mother had made using my grandmother's recipe passed down through 4 generations. "It's biryani, rice with lamb and spices." Melissa dramatically pushed the plate away and grabbed her throat. "Spices? You mean those dirty powders from street markets? No wonder I feel sick. The smell alone is contaminating." She ran to the bathroom making loud vomiting noises that everyone could hear, even though I knew she wasn't actually throwing up because the bathroom fan never turned on. My husband Christopher just sat there. "Maybe we should order pizza for Melissa. She has a sensitive stomach." His parents nodded along. Poor Melissa. She's trying so hard to be accepting, but some foods are just too much for civilized palates. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she watched Melissa come back pretending to wipe her mouth. "I'm so sorry, but could you open all the windows? The smell is literally everywhere. It's in my hair, my clothes. I'll need to burn this outfit." She was wearing a designer dress that cost more than my mother's monthly rent. "This is our traditional food. It's not dirty or contaminated." Melissa laughed. "Traditional? You mean primitive? Before people learned about real cuisine?" She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. "I need to document this for my blog. My readers won't believe people actually eat this in America." Her blog had 12 followers, and they were all her fake accounts, but she acted like she was an influencer. "What's that brown thing?" "It looks like actual mud." She pointed at the dal my mother had spent hours perfecting. "It's lentils." Melissa made gagging sounds again. "Lentils? That's poverty food. Even homeless shelters serve better meals." Christopher's mother patted Melissa's hand. "You're so brave for trying to sit through this. We should have warned you about their cooking." They'd been eating my cooking for 5 years before Melissa showed up. "Christopher, you love my food. You ask for it every week." He looked uncomfortable. "That was before I knew better. Melissa's been educating me about proper nutrition. These spices are basically poison." Melissa nodded enthusiastically. "I've been teaching him about clean eating. No weird seasonings, no mystery meats. Just simple American food the way it's meant to be." She pulled out a container from her purse. "I brought my own dinner just in case. Boiled chicken and plain rice. See? Normal food that doesn't assault your senses." But I recognized that container. It was from the Indian restaurant downtown. "That's from Taj Palace. That's literally Indian food." Melissa went red. "No, it's not. It's from my meal prep service." I pulled out my phone and showed the restaurant's Instagram. That's their container, with their logo. "You eat Indian food when we're not around." Christopher's family looked confused. "Melissa, you said Indian food makes you vomit." She tried to grab my phone. "That's different. Restaurant Indian food is sanitized. Home cooking is unsanitary. Everyone knows immigrants don't follow food safety." My mother finally spoke. "I'm a certified food safety manager. I run a catering business. I have more food handling certifications than any restaurant." Melissa rolled her eyes. "Certificates from where? Your homeland? Those don't count here." My mother pulled out her certificates from the state health department, all dated and official. "These are from here. I've been certified for 15 years. Melissa changed tactics. "Well, it still smells disgusting. I can't help my physical reactions. Some of us have refined senses." That's when my 12-year-old niece Aria spoke up. "Aunt Melissa, you ate 2 plates of this exact food at the neighborhood potluck last month. You said it was the best thing you'd ever tasted." Melissa glared at her. "I was being polite." Aria pulled out her phone. "No, you asked for the recipe. I have the video. You were licking the plate." She played the video of Melissa devouring the same biryani she was now calling disgusting. In the video, she was telling everyone how amazing it was and asking my mother to teach her. That's not me. But it clearly was. Same dress she'd worn to my birthday. Same voice. Same face moaning about how incredible the flavors were. Christopher looked shocked. "You said you'd never tried Indian food before tonight." His mother was staring at Melissa. "You made us order plain pasta at every family dinner because you said spices would kill you." That's when everything clicked. I went to the kitchen and came back with a paper. The paper was a catering contract. I held it up so everyone could see Melissa's signature at the bottom, dated 3 months ago. The contract requested authentic Indian cuisine for her book club event, specifically biryani and dal. Christopher's face went white. I placed the contract on the table right next to her phone that was still playing the video of her eating my mother's food at the potluck. Melissa lunged across the table trying to grab it. I pulled the contract back and held it against my chest. My hands weren't shaking even though my heart was going crazy. She tried to reach for it again, but Warren put his hand on her arm. Christopher's mother stood up and suggested we all calm down and discuss this privately. Her voice was high and nervous, like she was trying to smooth things over before they got worse. But Aria spoke up again. She said she had more videos of Melissa eating Indian food at different family events. Melissa's face turned bright red. Not embarrassed red, but angry red, like she wanted to scream. She stared at Aria with this look that would have scared me if I was 12. Aria just stared back and kept scrolling through her phone. Warren finally spoke. He asked his wife what was going on. His voice was quiet, but there was something underneath it that made everyone stop and listen. It wasn't the first time she'd been caught lying. You could tell from how he said it, like he'd suspected things before but never had proof. Melissa started talking fast about how this was all a misunderstanding, and everyone was taking things out of context. But I started reading from the contract, out loud so everyone could hear. The part where Melissa specifically wrote that she wanted the most flavorful and spicy traditional dishes available. She used the word flavorful. She praised my mother's cooking as extraordinary in her initial email. I read that part twice. Christopher stood up so fast his chair scraped really loud against the floor. The sound made everyone jump. He asked Melissa directly if she'd been lying this whole time. Just like that. No softening it or giving her a way out. Melissa's face changed. The confident look she'd had all night just cracked. She stammered something about the contract being out of context. She said she was just being polite back then, that she didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings when she placed the order. But that didn't make sense. You don't order food you think is disgusting for your book club. You don't use words like extraordinary and flavorful if you're just being polite. My mother walked over quietly and placed her food safety certifications on the table. Then she added her catering business license. Then 5-star health inspection reports from the past 3 years. She didn't slam them down or make a big show of it. She just laid them out one by one like she was dealing cards. She spoke in this calm voice that was somehow scarier than if she'd been yelling. She said she'd served over 2,000 clients, including the mayor's office, including 3 hospital staff events, and never once had anyone gotten sick from her food. Not one person in 15 years. Christopher's father picked up the certificates and started looking at them closely, really reading them. His face changed from dismissive to confused, like he was trying to figure out how he'd gotten everything so wrong. Arya pulled up her Instagram and turned her phone around to show everyone. It was a post from 2 weeks ago. Melissa had tagged my mother's catering company with 5-star emojis. The caption said, "Best food in the city, absolutely divine flavors." The post had 43 likes. Several of them were from women I recognized as Melissa's book club friends. Arya said those same friends were texting Melissa right now asking what was happening, asking why she was acting so weird at dinner tonight. Melissa grabbed for her phone, but Arya pulled it away. She announced that she'd already taken screenshots of everything. The post, the comments, all of it. Melissa tried to delete the post anyway, but her hands were shaking so bad she kept hitting the wrong buttons. Christopher sat back down. His chair made this heavy thud sound. He asked me how long I'd known about Melissa's double standard. His voice was barely louder than a whisper. I told him I suspected something was wrong when Melissa started making those comments about civilized food. It was right after she started dating Warren 2 years ago. She only said those things when my mother wasn't around to hear them. Christopher's mother interrupted. She said Melissa had told them I was trying to force strange food on the family, that I was making everyone uncomfortable with foreign customs. That's what Melissa had said. Word for word, apparently. Warren looked at his wife and demanded to know why she'd been lying to his family about hating Indian food. He pointed at her phone, still showing the Instagram post. He said she clearly ordered it regularly. She posted about it online. She praised it to her friends. So why was she sitting here calling it disgusting and primitive? Melissa finally broke down. Not crying. Just her whole act falling apart. She admitted she thought Warren's family would respect her more if she seemed sophisticated and discerning about food. She didn't want them to think she was one of those people who ate ethnic food. The words hung there. One of those people. Even Christopher's parents looked uncomfortable now. Like they couldn't pretend they didn't hear the racism in what she'd just said. I asked Melissa directly what she meant by "you people" and "civilized palates." I wanted her to either own what she'd said, or admit she was performing cruelty for an audience. She tried to claim she was just joking, that everyone was being too sensitive. But Arya pointed out that Melissa had made her cry last Christmas. She'd said Arya's homemade samosas looked like dirty pouches. Christopher's mother's face showed real shock, like she was just now realizing this behavior had been hurting her granddaughter. My mother spoke up. She said she'd spent 15 years building a business serving the food of her ancestors with pride. She wouldn't apologize for her culture or her cooking to anyone. She told Melissa that the primitive food she'd insulted represented generations of knowledge and family tradition. The fact that Melissa secretly wanted it while publicly mocking it said everything about Melissa's character, not the food. Christopher's father actually nodded. That surprised everyone, including me. Christopher finally found his voice. He told his parents he'd been eating my family's cooking for 5 years. He'd never once thought it was anything but delicious until Melissa started making comments. He admitted he stopped defending the food because Melissa made him feel unsophisticated, made him feel like he was too easily influenced by me. I felt this weird mix of being right and being angry. It took public humiliation for my husband to acknowledge what he'd been allowing to happen, what he'd been letting Melissa do to me and my mother for 2 whole years. Warren stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. He grabbed Melissa's purse and jacket from the back of her seat. She tried to say something, but he held up his hand. They needed to leave right now and have a serious talk at home about everything that just happened. His voice was quiet but hard like stone. Melissa opened her mouth to protest, but Warren was already walking toward the door with her things. She had no choice but to follow him. Christopher's parents sat frozen at the table. His mother looked at the door where Warren and Melissa had just left. Then she looked at Christopher. Then at me. She seemed torn between running after them and staying to face what they'd all been doing. Christopher's father cleared his throat but didn't say anything. The silence after they left felt heavy and thick. Christopher's mother finally spoke. She admitted she hadn't actually tasted any of the food tonight. Melissa had warned her before they came over that the smell might make her sick, that the spices could cause stomach problems, that it was better to just be polite and not eat anything. I stared at her. All those plates sitting untouched around the table. All that food my mother had spent 3 days preparing. Nobody had even tried it except to insult it. I gestured to the biryani still steaming in its serving dish. I told her she should actually taste what she'd been avoiding based on lies. She looked nervous. Her hand shook a little as she reached for the serving spoon. She put a tiny amount on her plate. Just a few grains of rice and one small piece of lamb. She picked up her fork like it might bite her. Then she took the smallest possible bite. Her face changed. The tight, worried look disappeared. Her eyes got wide. She chewed slowly. Then she took another bite. A bigger one this time. She looked at my mother standing in the kitchen doorway. She said it was just really good food. Well seasoned. Perfectly cooked. Nothing scary or weird about it at all. Christopher's father pushed his chair back and stood up. He walked over to where my mother was standing. He looked her in the eye and said he was sorry. He let his daughter-in-law's attitude change how he acted. He was ashamed he never questioned her claims. My mother had been nothing but welcoming to his family for years. He should have defended her instead of going along with Melissa's garbage. My mother nodded slowly. She accepted his apology but told him that words needed to be followed by changed behavior, especially around Arya. His granddaughter had been watching adults treat her aunt's culture like it was less than, like it was something to be ashamed of. That did damage that couldn't be fixed with just an apology. Arya got up from her seat and ran to my mother. She wrapped her arms around her waist and held on tight. My mother hugged her back. I could see tears running down both their faces. Christopher's father looked down at the floor. He nodded again. He understood. Christopher tried to catch my eye. He started to say he was sorry too. I cut him off. I told him we needed to have a much longer conversation later about why he didn't stand up for me or my mother when it actually mattered. He'd known Melissa for less than 2 years. He'd known me for 7. The fact that he chose to believe her story over his own experience said something really troubling about our marriage. Something we needed to talk about seriously. He looked like I'd slapped him. His face went pale. But he didn't argue. He just sat there looking devastated because he knew I was right. He knew he'd failed me in a way that couldn't be fixed with a simple sorry. Christopher's mother asked Arya if she could see the other videos. Arya pulled out her phone and they sat down together on the couch. They spent the next 20 minutes scrolling through Arya's social media and her saved videos. Every few seconds, Christopher's mother would gasp or shake her head. There were videos of Melissa at restaurants praising Indian food, posts where she called places authentic gems and cultural treasures, comments where she recommended specific dishes to her friends, all while she'd been telling the family that ethnic food was dangerous, that it was unsanitary, that eating it would make you sick. The evidence just kept piling up. Christopher's mother found a post from just 3 weeks ago where Melissa wrote a whole paragraph about how much she loved the complex flavors and traditional cooking methods, right before she came to our house and called that same cooking primitive. The lies were so clear and so calculated that nobody could pretend they didn't see it anymore. My mother started quietly wrapping up the food. She got out the containers from the cabinet and began spooning biryani into them. She moved slowly like she was tired. She said she wouldn't leave the food where it wasn't wanted or appreciated. Christopher's father stopped her. He asked if they could please eat together properly. He wanted to actually experience the meal she'd worked so hard to make. He wanted to learn about the dishes and what they meant, where they came from. My mother hesitated. She looked at me. I could see she was trying to decide if this was real or just more polite fakeness. But Christopher's father's face looked genuine, like he was actually trying to make things right. My mother put down the container she was holding. She said, okay, they could eat together. We all sat back down at the table. My mother brought out fresh plates for Christopher's parents. She explained each dish as she served it. The biryani came from her grandmother's region in the north. The dal was a recipe her mother taught her when she was Arya's age. The raita was simple but important because it balanced the spices. She told them about cooking with her own mother as a child, about learning which spices went together and why, about the stories that went with each recipe. Christopher's parents listened. Actually listened. They asked questions about the ingredients and the cooking methods. They tried everything on the table. They admitted it was all delicious. Nothing like what Melissa had described. Arya jumped in with her own stories about helping her grandmother cook, about learning to roll out roti, about understanding where her family came from through food. Her voice was full of pride. She wasn't ashamed of her culture. She was excited to share it. Christopher pulled me into the kitchen while everyone else was eating. He said he needed to tell me something. He admitted he'd been letting Melissa's opinions change him. She seemed so confident about everything, so worldly and sophisticated. He didn't want to look unsophisticated in front of his family. So he went along with her ideas about food and culture. He let her convince him that what he'd always loved was somehow wrong. He'd been choosing comfort over loyalty, asking me to make my culture smaller to avoid conflict. He could see now how deeply wrong that was. I looked at him standing there looking miserable. I told him I needed time to process everything, to decide if his apology came with actual change or just temporary guilt that would fade. He needed to show me through actions, not words, that things would be different. He nodded. He said he understood. The evening finally wound down. Christopher's parents packed up containers of leftovers to take home. They promised to call tomorrow after everyone had time to think about what happened. Arya hugged me goodbye at the door. She whispered in my ear that she was glad I didn't let Aunt Melissa get away with being mean about our food and culture. I hugged her back hard. After everyone left, Christopher and I sat at the dining table. The plates were half empty now. Some of the food had been eaten. Some was packed up to go home with people. The candles had burned down to stubs. We sat there in silence. Both of us knew our marriage had reached a turning point, that things couldn't go back to how they were before, that we had to figure out if we could build something better or if the damage was too deep. The next morning, my phone rang early. It was my mother. She said she'd barely slept. She felt humiliated by what happened last night, having to prove her food was clean and safe to people who should have trusted her, having to watch her daughter's husband side with someone else. But she also felt strangely powerful. The truth had finally come out. Everyone had seen Melissa's lies for what they were. My mother said she was proud of how I handled everything. I used evidence and stayed calm instead of just getting emotional. We talked for almost an hour about the pattern of always having to defend our culture, always having to prove our worth to people who should accept us as family. How exhausting it was. How unfair. My mother said she was tired of shrinking herself to make other people comfortable. She was done apologizing for who she was. I spent the next 3 days replaying that dinner in my mind. Every detail felt burned into my memory. Christopher tried to talk to me several times, but I kept telling him I needed space. He slept in the guest room without arguing. On Thursday afternoon, my phone rang while I was at work. Christopher's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. His voice sounded strained when he told me Warren had just called him. Warren and Melissa were starting marriage counseling. The food incident wasn't an isolated thing. Melissa had been lying about all kinds of stuff to make herself look better to his family. She'd told Warren's parents that certain neighbors were rude to her when really she'd never even talked to them. She claimed a coworker stole her ideas when the coworker had receipts proving otherwise. She made up stories about people being jealous of her or treating her badly. All of it designed to position herself as this refined person, surrounded by lesser people who didn't appreciate her. Warren found out because one of her book club friends called him directly after seeing the Instagram drama. The friend had screenshots of Melissa trash-talking people who'd been nothing but kind to her. Christopher said Warren sounded devastated, like his whole marriage was built on lies he'd been too blind to see. We talked for almost an hour. Christopher kept saying how close we came to letting Melissa's poison ruin everything. How she almost convinced his whole family that my culture was somehow wrong or dirty. How easily they'd believed her because she acted so confident. I told him I was glad the truth came out, but I was still processing how quickly he'd turned on food he'd loved for 5 years. How he'd let her words matter more than his own experience. He went quiet for a long time before admitting he didn't have a good answer for that. 2 weeks later, Christopher's mother called and invited us to their house for dinner. She specifically asked if my mother could come too. I almost said no. The whole thing felt too raw still, but my mother said we should give them a chance to make things right. We drove over on a Saturday evening. Christopher's parents had set their dining table with actual care this time. They'd made chicken biryani using my mother's recipe. It wasn't perfect. The rice was a little mushy and they'd gone light on the spices, but they'd tried. Really tried. The kitchen smelled like cardamom and cinnamon. They'd put up some decorations that actually reflected our culture instead of the generic stuff they used to have. Real artwork instead of random items they thought looked exotic. Christopher's mother pulled me aside before dinner. She apologized for enabling Melissa, for letting her own discomfort with cultural differences turn into something uglier. She admitted she'd always felt a little intimidated by how close Christopher and I were, how much he loved my family's traditions. Melissa had given her an excuse to push back against that without examining her own prejudice. She said she was ashamed it took public humiliation for her to see what she'd been doing. The apology felt genuine, not just words meant to smooth things over. We ate dinner together, and this time everyone asked real questions about the food, about the spices and techniques, about what the dishes meant to our family. Christopher's father told stories about traveling when he was younger and being too scared to try local food, how he regretted playing it safe instead of being curious. My mother relaxed as the evening went on. She even laughed at Christopher's dad's terrible pronunciation of some dish names. Christopher and I started couples counseling the following week. Our first session was awkward. The counselor asked us each to describe the main problem in our marriage. I said Christopher chose peace over partnership. He'd rather avoid conflict than stand up for me. Christopher said he'd been taking the easy path for so long he didn't know how to change. The counselor made us do exercises about communication and boundaries, about recognizing patterns and breaking them. Christopher started reading books about my culture, actually reading them instead of just nodding along when I mentioned things. He asked questions, real questions about traditions and history and why certain things mattered. At his uncle's birthday party, someone made a comment about ethnic food giving them stomach problems. Christopher shut it down immediately, told them that was ignorant and disrespectful. I didn't have to say anything. He'd handled it himself. The marriage wasn't magically fixed. We still had hard conversations, still disagreed about stuff, but we were building something more honest, something where I didn't have to constantly defend who I was. 3 months after that terrible dinner, my mother got a call from Christopher's father's company. They wanted to hire her catering business for all their corporate events, quarterly meetings, holiday parties, client dinners. It was a huge contract, steady income for months. My mother cried when she told me, not because of the money, although that helped, but because it felt like real amends, like they understood actions mattered more than words. Around the same time, Christopher mentioned that Warren and Melissa had separated. Warren moved out and filed for divorce. Melissa had apparently tried to blame everyone else for the marriage falling apart. I didn't celebrate someone's relationship ending. That felt wrong, but I was relieved she wouldn't be at family gatherings anymore, spreading her toxic attitudes. Christopher and I decided to host another dinner, both our families, Same menu as before. This time when everyone arrived, they came with curiosity instead of judgment. Christopher's parents brought wine they'd researched to pair with the food. Arya helped my mother in the kitchen, teaching Christopher's mother how to roll roti properly. Everyone sat at the table and actually tasted everything. Asked about ingredients and cooking methods. Shared stories about their own family foods and traditions. The evening felt completely different from that first disaster. People were present, respectful, genuinely interested in learning and sharing. Christopher squeezed my hand under the table and I squeezed back. We still had work to do, but we were finally moving in the right direction.